Now in this movie, I want to throw us into a real-life situation where we're going to use a few little tips and tricks from the module. And the first one I want to show you is using the 671 saturation module to act as a sort of preamplifier on a vocal to get it just to sound a little bit thicker and warmer. So first of all, I'll play you a little bit of this vocal in the track here that we're going to be using.
Past the pastures, down on my mind, idle circumstance for all humankind, broken resort for our broken souls. It's just that fear knows nothing, only love knows.
Okay, we'll just go from there. Now at the moment that vocal's dry, and I can tell you that I know for a certain this was just recorded in a bedroom situation with a low price condenser mic into a really cheap interface. So nothing highfalutin about this. This is a low budget home recording. Now at the moment it's got some reverb on it, you can probably hear, and that's about it. It's dead flat. So here's an empty 6050 that's sitting there at the moment. Now of course it's going to want some EQ and compression as well. I'm going to do that, and I'll do those in slots number 2. Just a little bit. So a little bit of 670 EQ, and I'll take the matching compressor over here as well, the 671. So I'm just going to put a little bit of top end into it to sparkle it up, but not a great deal.
Past the pastures, down on my mind,
A little bit there.
circumstance,
Gentle compression.
all humankind, broken resort for our broken souls. It's just that fear knows nothing, only love knows.
Certainly that's going to make an improvement. I'll just play that again in solo, and we'll go with the bypassed version, and then I'll put in the processed version here, and I'll make up a little bit of gain at the end because we are taking a little bit off with the compressor. So in bypass first.
Past the pastures, down on my mind, idle circumstance for all humankind.
So certainly it's got more bite in it. Obviously I unbypassed that halfway through that sentence there. So let's just play that first line over and over so we can go apples for apples.
Past the pastures, down on my mind,
Versus.
past the pastures, down on my mind.
So things are obviously a little bit brighter, a little bit tighter with the compression, but that's it. But what I'd like to do now is add a little bit of saturation, but not to distort the vocal. Obviously, if we push this too hard, we're going to get this kind of crunchy,
Past the pasture.
where it's overly saturated and compressed, and that's not a natural sound at all. Let's put our tone in the middle here and bring this down. Now, I almost want to make this so you don't really even notice it, but you do notice it when you bypass. So we want to creep in just a tiny bit of this guy here. And I'll set this now for the rest of that line.
Past the pastures, down on my mind.
A little bit like that.
Idle circumstance for all
Now let's bypass this
humankind.
module.
Broken resort for our broken souls. It's just that fear knows nothing.
A little bit harder.
Only love knows. Past the pastures, down on my mind.
Bypass.
Idle circumstance for all humankind. Broken resort.
It's adding just a tiny bit of energy, just a little bit of distortion on the top. That's putting some harmonics above that. Now in the track, I think that's going to sit better. It's going to sit more to the front of the mix and be a bit more commanding than it was before when it was falling away.
Past the pastures, down on my mind. Idle circumstance for all humankind.
Bypass.
Past the pastures, down on my mind. Idle circumstance for all humankind.
So the difference there is quite dramatic, isn't it? Now, a lot of it's to do, of course, with these other two modules that we've thrown on there, particularly the brightness we're getting from the 670 here, but they have to work in concert together. This is still adding some pleasant harmonics, which are then getting fed through these two as well, which is why I've put the 671 at the beginning. But before we close off on this movie, I'm going to push the tone up a little bit and hear the difference that makes. So pushing this to the right will bias the tone even more towards the top end, which may or may not get too much with this one. Let's have a listen.
Past the pastures, down on my mind. Idle circumstance for all humankind.
So that's nice and clear now. It's right up the front. If I dull this off a little bit in the other direction, we might find the vocal going backwards a little bit, but let's have a go.
Past the pastures, down on my mind. Idle circumstance.
Yeah, not quite as exciting.
Humankind, broken resort for our
I'm actually for pushing this a bit further and then possibly taking a little bit off the master output now that the vocals come forward so much.
Past the pastures, down on my mind, idle circumstance.
Let's bypass halfway through.
Humankind, broken resort for our broken souls. It's just that fear knows nothing, only love knows.
So there we are. The S671 used almost like a pseudo preamp module conditioning the signal before it goes into traditional EQ and compression. Next up, we'll look at another tip.